But you don't seem disabled. You should be so proud of yourself. You hide your disability so well. But you can't be disabled because you're nothing like my little brother that has dyslexia. These are all genuine comments I've received from Warwick students about my diagnosis of autism. The lack of education surrounding disability and women with autism more specifically is astounding. It didn't seem to matter how many celebrities spoke about disability or infographics were posted on Instagram, I still felt bombarded by casual ableism in my everyday life. I grew increasingly frustrated by these waves of discrimination, and I realized if I wanted to feel a direct change in my community, I was going to have to be the one to start that conversation. What started as a simple Instagram post designed to promote allyship snowballed into an educational campaign and the idea for my first book. So briefly, what is ableism? Ableism is the discrimination of one with a disability in favor of someone who doesn't have one. So this can be both a mental health disability, cognitive, or physical disability. I have autism, which is a developmental disorder caused by differences in my brain, not caused by vaccinations. So what does this look like? Well, I approach communication and life slightly differently than the rest of you. My behavior can be restrictive or repetitive, and I can have intense special interests. So all of these diagnostic criteria are very sterile and negative, so let me tell you how I see it. Autism is my superpower. Yes, I see social interactionally differently to you, but that doesn't mean I'm unable to communicate. In fact, it means that I have unique perceptions and often insightful thoughts. I have an intense ability to focus, and I research my interests deeply and love teaching others about it. I can absorb and retain large amounts of information and learn it very fast. I take a methodical but novel approach to problems, and other positives associated with autism are integrity, tenacity, creativity, and resilience. But despite my positive view of disability, I was still facing this ableism in my everyday life, and I realized I was going to need an avalanche to stop it. But how do you start this change? How do you form an avalanche? Well, an avalanche starts from a snowball that's gained momentum, that started from a single snowflake. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start at my snowflake. I noticed there was this misconception when the characters displayed on the media and the stereotypes projected onto me didn't align with how I viewed myself or my experiences. I saw characters like Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory and Forrest Gump, and I didn't feel like I could relate to them, and I certainly didn't see any female examples. I didn't struggle with social interaction. I'm definitely not introverted nor socially anxious, so I was left with this pressing question: am I actually autistic? Were the doctors and the psychologists all wrong? Or is the media portraying a harmful stereotype? And if this is the case, surely there needs to be a change. But how do we make this change? I realize I'm not a TV executive and I'm definitely not an actor, so I couldn't go and change these characters single-handedly. But in a sense of the word, I'm a character in my own life and to the community around me. So my Snowflake act was a simple one. On the 4th of December 2021, I posted a picture of myself on Instagram with a large caption explaining what special day it was, that I had an invisible disability, and what this meant. I was absolutely terrified because I'd never told many people, and I was scared that I was going to be ostracized or rejected or laughed at. And in fact, the reaction was the complete opposite. People were curious and they wanted to know more. I had people reach out and ask me questions. I had people reach out and tell me that I broke their perceived stereotype of autism. But most importantly, I had people reach out and tell me that they finally felt seen and like they had a community and a friend that understood them, because unbeknownst to me, they too were autistic. But during these conversations, I realized two misconceptions were regularly occurring, and I thought I would address them here because I'm certain audience members have them too. So the first misconception is that people with autism fall into two categories. They're either incredibly intelligent, a savant, say, in their field, or they're incredibly unintelligent. And these two categories often come with the label of autism if you're unintelligent, or Asperger's if you're incredibly intelligent. But why is this so wrong and harmful? Well, firstly, autistic people are not binary. We don't fit into either end of some figurative imagination of an intelligence spectrum. Just like neurotypicals, that's people without a mental health or cognitive disability. We fall both within that spectrum and along it. But this is harmful for a much deeper and darker reason. Since 2013, psychologists no longer differentiate between autism and Asperger's in the DSM-5. This is because Asperger's is named after and was founded by physician Hans Asperger. He was a scientist that collaborated with the Nazis during the Holocaust. He personally picked which children to send to Am Spiegelgrund Clinic. This was a children's psychiatric home that was primarily responsible for the deaths of 200,000 children during the Holocaust. He publicly legitimized the Nazis' race hygiene initiative, including forced sterilization, and was renowned for being harsher to young children than adults, describing a girl as young as 4 as an unbearable burden to her mother because she had educational difficulties. He decided that a permanent place in the clinic was necessary, and after only 2 months of treatment, she died. So this idea that autism being intelligent or not intelligent is not as simple as we believe. In fact, it's laced with this systemic murder and racism. It needs to be addressed. But the second misconception is that people with autism fail to communicate. Now, this can be that we're mute, or we don't understand social interaction, or that we can't empathize or express emotion. Now, I'm going to explain why this is wrong with a story. So this gent here, this is astronaut Ted. He goes to the University of Warwick, and he is the most intelligent astronaut that NASA has ever seen. So he's sent to a far, far away planet to research with horrible aliens and disgusting conditions, and that planet is called Coventry. On arrival, he realizes that the aliens are speaking this weird language that he doesn't understand, and immediately they assume that he's stupid. In reality, we know he's incredibly intelligent, and it's in fact the setting and language that's hindering him. If he was given the time, patience, kindness, and tools to learn, he could thrive. But this is a story that's all too familiar for those of us with autism. In this example, those of you that speak the language of social interaction fluently and naturally, well, unfortunately, you're from Coventry. And those of us that have to learn this social language, its idiosyncrasies and unspoken rules and nuances, well, we're from Warwick. But it doesn't mean we can't communicate, and it doesn't mean we're not intelligent. And it didn't mean so for astronaut Ted either. Just like him, if we're given the patience, the time, the practice, and the tools, we too can thrive. So, what do these misconceptions mean? Well, they mean that the disabled community needs people to better educate themselves and call out these discriminatory comments. We need people to stand and support us as allies. But what is an ally? How do we take this snowballed community from an Instagram post and snowball it into an avalanche of allyship? Well, allyship is twofold. There's active allyship and passive allyship, and both are important. So starting with passive. Passive allyship is ensuring that you're engaging with and exposing yourself to this disabled community in your everyday life. It doesn't require you to go out of your way. With 1/5 of the population facing some form of disability, take a minute to think about your own life. Are you engaging with that 1/5? Are you following anyone on social media that is open about their disability? Do you enter into interactions understanding that there's a likelihood they may have an invisible disability and you may need to accommodate? When you go about your everyday tasks, do you ever stop and consider that this may be a challenge for someone else and you may be taking that action for granted? A task for you all this evening. On your journey home tonight, see how far into your commute you can get before you would be hindered if you were disabled. Is your tube stop wheelchair accessible, or is it only stairs? And how far out of your normal route would someone in a wheelchair have to go to find an accessible journey? If you were deaf and wished to ask your train conductor a question, how likely is it that your train conductor, or in fact anyone on that train, speaks any sign language? I struggle with sensory overload. How easily do you think I take our university buses, given how crowded and pushy they can be? And if I did get aboard, how easily is it that I'm going to find a disability seat, given that my disability is invisible? But you can do more. You can be an active ally. Active allyship is accommodating before you are asked and because you want to, not because you must. This can look like very different things, but a couple examples for you. Your office should be wheelchair accessible before you hire someone in a wheelchair. If you run a society social media page, you should be filling in that box that lets you verbally describe a picture so that it's accessible to all. You should learn the very basics of sign language so that if in the scenario you could help a deaf person. Active allyship is showing that disabled people are welcomed and respected in your space. It's showing you understand you're in a position of privilege and you wish to use it kindly and wisely. With 1/5 of the population facing some form of disability, there will be a time you come across a scenario when you could have had an action in place beforehand to make a disabled person like me feel less burdensome, isolated, or alone. And finally, call out both overt and colloquial ableism. When you hear comments laced with prejudice or insult, stop them. Educate others on their misconceptions and highlight how harmful these comments can be. When you hear people casually use the disgusting words like retard or spaz, call them out. I understand it is uncomfortable to address people like this, but remind yourself of that position of privilege and the fact that your discomfort will be temporary, whereas my disability and the pain of those words are for life. You are only as good an ally as you are when no one is looking or when your allyship does not serve you. Allyship is not posting on Instagram when it's a trend or patting yourself on the back for knowing someone that's disabled. It's sitting in your discomfort. It's educating and re-educating. It's looking at your privilege in the mirror and addressing it head on. Allyship is a continuous position that can make a large difference to 1/5 of the population. That is a huge impact that cannot be underestimated. So stand up, speak out, educate and accommodate before you're asked. Make room for us in conversations, and when we talk, sit down and listen. Be an ally and join the rolling snowball of progress into an avalanche of allyship. Thank you.